Hello and welcome back to the Tea on the Tea Trans in Conversation. My name is Tobi Evans, my pronouns are he, they, and I'm very excited to welcome our guest tonight, Logan Timmins. Before we start, I'd like to acknowledge that we're filming today on the lands of the Bunurong Boon Wurrung and Wurundjeri Woi Wurrung people of the Kulin Nation. It always was and always will be Aboriginal land, and I'd like to acknowledge elders past and present. As I said, our guest today is Logan Timmins. Logan is a tabletop game designer and has a beautiful beard. Welcome, Logan.
Hi, Toby. Thank you. Yes. Thank you for complimenting the beard.
It's stunning.
Thank you.
I love it. So, what are your pronouns and what is your star sign?
He, him, my pronouns, and my star sign. Do you want the long answer or the short answer?
The long answer.
I knew you were going
Always.
to say that. Okay. So the long answer is that I'm kind of a Sagittarius Scorpio cusp.
Ooh.
And, I'd look at different newspapers and stuff and be back and forth. But then my partner and my metamour dive a bit deep into astrology and things, and they have a particular website they like to look at, so I put in all my details and stuff. And that said, Scorpio.
Okay. So we're going to say most likely still Scorpio, bit on the cars.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Technically, according to this website,
Okay.
Scorpio, but some Sagittarius vibes.
Nice. Well, I love both Sagittarians and Scorpios.
Perfect.
So you're particularly welcome.
Great.
Fabulous. Can you tell me a bit about yourself?
I'm Logan, as I said. I'm a tabletop game designer. I love forests, and I'm a budding plant dad.
A budding plant dad?
Budding plant dad.
Yes. Well,
Yeah.
I'm going to have to add that to the questions now.
Yeah, absolutely. Please do.
So what is tabletop game? What are they?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's interesting still. I've gotten so deep in this world, right, of tabletop games that I forget that not everyone knows what it means. So I'll go off spieling all these things and people are like, you lost me 10 minutes ago. So tabletop role-playing games are often analog games that just use...
What's an analog game?
Analog, not digital.
Okay.
Not video games.
Like in person?
In person, you're using paper, pencils, and often dice.
Okay.
The most famous and popular example is Dungeons and Dragons, which folks have now seen a lot of due to like Stranger Things and some streaming shows that have really gone off. But that's the most popular example, but there's far, far more many games than Dungeons and Dragons, which is fantasy, kind of high fantasy, fighting, magic, dragons, that kind of thing. But you can go to all sorts of places with tabletop games. You can go to space. You can go to a garden. You can be a mushroom, Anything's possible because the main driving is imagination. So whatever you can imagine, there's a game that will support you to create a story and go on a journey in that world.
And so how do they work for anyone who's like not played one before or is kind of like there's dice and imagination and a game and like how does it work?
Sure. So the easy answer is the game provides rules that provide prompts to help you along your imaginative journey.
So like a guidebook?
Kind of like a guidebook. So you might like to think of it like a choose your own adventure book. But when you have to come to a decision or you've got a plan that you need to enact, you will often roll dice to see how well that goes rather than purely relying on your own intuition. So that adds a bit of randomness and that can create a bit more of a different story than you're expecting to tell. And often it depends on the game, but often if you roll high on your die, it's good or it goes better, and lower means, a complication happens or you fail and you have to try something else.
Very cool. And who plays games?
Lots of people. There's, all ages from super old, no offense to people who are super old, I could have said that more nicely, to quite young kids. I've played role-playing games with my young brothers who are now 7 and 8, which is ridiculous.
Oh wow, that's really young.
Blinked my eyes and they were 3 and 4 before. But yeah, all ages, all creeds, backgrounds, everything. There is a strong contingent of like queer tabletop role players, designers, and that sort of thing, especially around role-playing games being able allowing us to be able to explore different avenues of ourselves. And there are a number of stories out there of people realizing they're trans by playing a character of the opposite gender and being like, hang on, this is weirdly comfortable. And then later coming out. Yeah.
Nice. How did you get into games?
I got into tabletop games via Tumblr.
Okay.
Back in the day.
Taking me back.
When that was we're going back in time here.
I'm with you. Tumblr. It's 2010.
Yeah.
My study is dark. Like
there's posters on the walls.
Yeah, there's posters on the walls. Panic at the Disco is playing. Full Out Boy posters. Love
Excellent.
it.
Perfect. That's the scene.
Cool.
And I'm on Tumblr and I'm seeing a gift set of about 8 people sitting around a table talking and laughing. And off in the comments, people going, oh, this was such an incredible scene. I was crying. And I'm seeing these people sitting at a table. I'm like, what are you talking about? How are you having such a reaction to people sitting at a table and talking to each other? And so I was intrigued. I was like, okay, I have to find out what this is, I guess. And that was a streamed show of people playing Dungeons and Dragons. And I watched that, was instantly hooked. And
Okay, can I just pause us here? That sounds like the most boring thing I can imagine. Can you tell me, like, I'd love to understand why that was so, like, hooking for you. Like, what was it about it that you were like, oh my God, amazing. I'm sure, like, when it actually happened, it was, like, amazing and emotive, but I'm just like, that
That's so boring.
Yeah.
That's
So please.
100% fair. Yeah, from the outside, I've said I'm watching people talk at a table, and that does not sound exciting. But I think what particularly grabbed me about these folks were all voice actors, so they had acting experience. And so what I was really watching was like an improvised TV show. And it was big, sweeping character arcs and high stakes, great characters. And so it was like watching a TV show, but knowing that none of this was planned out in advance and like anything could happen kind of raised the stakes and kind of got the hooks in me a bit more. And also realizing that Dungeons and Dragons is a game that I could go down and buy. So I could do this in a way, not exactly the same, but I could do this too. And it was an instance of like co-creative storytelling that I hadn't realized that I'd really wanted. Like I didn't know that was a thing. And when I saw that, I was like, yeah, I need to do this.
So it sounds like it kind of provoked something like quite deep within you to be like, I want to like play this, I want to like learn more about it.
Yeah.
Very juicy. So while we're like back in the past, we're still in that kind of dark study. Tumblr's on the screen. Can you tell me a bit about your gender journey?
My gender journey probably kicked off around a similar time.
Were they related?
I mean, being on Tumblr and on the internet was definitely related and part of it.
Paint me the full scene.
So yeah, I mean, there's the story of signs and things that happened when I was younger, and being on Animal Crossing and always choosing a boy avatar and that sort of thing. And I think this is a funny story actually. The first time I heard of trans people was, I think there was a TV segment about a young trans girl. And I watched that, or the brief snippet of it that I saw, and I was like, well, this obviously isn't a real thing. Who would want to be a girl? And so then I just kind of moved on. And that's telling now. And then we skip forward into high school and, classic period of grappling with myself, who I am, versus who my parents are, and all that sort of thing with sexuality and gender. My sexuality and gender kind of were wrapped up in each other as I was exploring, and started hearing about trans people in, I think like there were a couple of news stories around or something, and maybe some people got big on Tumblr and some YouTube channels. And
so we're still on Tumblr at this point.
We're still on Tumblr at this point before hopping off. I started seeing trans men, trans masculine people as well. And there were a couple of people that I saw and was intrigued, like, what is this? And watched YouTube videos and was just like, oh my God, this is everything that I wanted. And was just like, okay, this makes so much sense. This is, I now saw like a road that I was really excited to go down. So that was in high school, in early high school.
And what from there? Like you started to kind of see other trans people and you're like, this is an option.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Like,
what do I do now?
Yeah. What now? Yeah.
Yeah. Did all the research. What's testosterone? What's it going to do? This. Amazingness.
It is stunning.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm just going to point to it as much as I can.
Please do.
I'm very proud.
Yeah, as you should be.
A many years long endeavor.
It's glorious.
Testosterone and top surgery and binding and Packers and SCPs and all this sort of thing. And just kind of exploded my brain. I eventually came out to friends and in family. Didn't go very well with family.
Sorry to hear that.
Yeah, that's a whole other thing. It took about 3 years, but they're pretty good now on me being trans. Managed to get through high school. High school was a rough period. I was forced to move schools to a Christian school.
Oh, wow.
Forced in the closet for those last 2 years, which sucked. Survived, so that's good. And then once I turned 18, started making the steps to, psychologists, psychiatrists, testosterone, top surgery, all those things.
It sounds like you knew like a lot earlier than turning 18 and being able to enact kind of stuff. Was that quite difficult as part of that challenging period?
Yeah, having to wait, for sure. That was tough. And feeling like, I couldn't do anything.
Yeah.
I couldn't go anywhere. I couldn't even like really socially. I felt like I couldn't socially transition either. But it was good in that like I could see me turning 18 as like a light at the end of the tunnel,
true.
and there was a clear like you are legally allowed to do whatever you want.
Yeah.
At this point,
You can't stop me.
Yeah, you can't. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm gonna go.
Yeah.
And like name change, I think was the first thing that I did. I had the paperwork before I turned 18 and filled it all out, and that was kind of my like holding on kind of action. And then once I turned 18, I started trying to get all the things into place. And my parents by that time had sort of started coming on board, and so there was some support in driving me places and getting me appointments and things. Interesting that the way that it turned out that I did know early enough and had to wait that long, so that by the time big things like top surgery happened, it had been about 3 years, so my parents had come on board, so they were able to largely be alongside me rather than like figuring it out at 18 and then being wanting to do top surgery but then not having them that support. There's a whole lot of different ways that could have gone. But.
I mean, I'm really glad that you were able to kind of learn that about yourself quite young. Like that's really, really awesome. But it sounds like it was really, really hard. High school for other, reasons as well. But also like I can't imagine like having to wait and be like, I can't make these choices. That sounds really rough. I'm sorry.
Yeah, thanks, Toby.
So you've kind of gone from this like, up and down journey that's like, now you're out here with your gorgeous beard, and you've made a tabletop game about your transition.
Yeah.
So can you tell us a bit about the game you've made?
Sure. I just want to throw in an asterisk in there. It's not just about my transition, and though that is a key, part of who I am. But it's about my life more broadly speaking, from the time that I was born to last year when I was 23. When I released the game. So it encompasses a whole bunch of things, including walking in forests. It does not yet include my budding plant fatherhood.
I look forward to Logan too.
Yep, that is in the work, so keep an eye out. But it includes things like being an older sibling, which is really important to me, to being creative and designing games and other sort of art things and play, and my transition as well, and various moments in my life that have been impactful. And I guess that game started why the seed that kind of planted that game was self-reflection, sort of like we've done just now, thinking about how my life could have gone many different ways. And an example is being on Tumblr and finding out about Dungeons and Dragons led me to like be so hooked in the game, led me to playing a real life game. I have a tattoo from that game that we played together for 4.5 years.
Oh my God.
That's where I met my partner. And like a whole bunch of things. That's how I got my current day job, and that's kind of it's a drop in the pond that's had huge ripples. And I only joined that game because I happened to see a Facebook post of like, I'm throwing this game, who wants to join? And if I hadn't been on Facebook that day, right, it would have totally switching the timeline. So I was thinking about that, and that felt like those small choices that you can make in games. The small decisions, choose your own adventure book. Do I choose A or B? Seems like a small choice, but it has huge effects. So I was thinking, if my life was like a game like that, like choose your own adventure, and I had chosen not to go on Facebook that day, what might my life look like? And so I created this game as a sort of way to explore that. So you get to choose as me, you play as a version of Logan. You get to choose, what choices you make throughout my life, and see what my life looks like in your hands after 23 years.
Wow, that's amazing. So something that you mentioned was making it about your kind of whole life and not just about your transition, which I love. It's really great to see like kind of trans stories where trans people are whole people, and not, as I'm sure you kind of have thought about a lot in terms of making the game. So what's that like, having people like, maybe like, have you seen people play the game? Have you like heard of people playing the game? Like, what's that like? People, as you said, having your life in their hands.
It's been really interesting. So I have sat down with a number of people to play. I did a lot of play testing, which is where you sit by someone as they play the game and they give you feedback, and you see, okay, what do I need to change for this to be a smoother experience overall? And I was also on a podcast playing this game on the Party of One podcast, which is that's a big deal in the niche zone that is indie tabletop game.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you. So I have watched a number of people play, and I believe all of them are queer. I don't know that I have that many cishet friends anyways. So I believe all of them are some flavor of the LGBTQ rainbow. And it was interesting to hear from them how their own sort of coming out journeys were reflected. And because it builds on your imagination, right? There are prompts, but you pull on your own imagination to expand them. People draw from their own experience. It's the easiest place to draw from when you're creating a story. And so it was really interesting to hear people almost re-experience their own life through mine.
Wow.
And there was one point in the podcast episode where I was sitting there and I was doing some of the reading out loud, but the game was mostly in Jeff's hands, and he decided to get a tattoo. And he described it to a tattoo that's very similar to one that I have in real life. And that's not information that I shared with him at all.
Oh, wow.
So that was, really interesting to see how similar, I am to someone else, even as we have very different journeys.
Something that you said that really sparked my curiosity was that people kind of replay their own coming out, and I don't doubt like other kind of parts of their life. Have people had quite like strong emotional reactions to the game, or has it been like healing, like challenging? Like what have people found?
Yeah, it depends on person to person, but a number of people, some feedback that I have gotten is that it has been a powerful experience to play as a method of self-reflection, and for some people healing as well, and even just sort of interesting and kind of a good not like a puzzle, but like just a brain exercise to go back and think over one's own life. So I have had some feedback.
And what made you choose like autobiography as a kind of way of making the game? Because obviously it sounds like there's a million ways, a million different types of game that you can make. So what made you choose to make Logan autobiographical?
It's just something I hadn't really seen before in the tabletop space. And
so autobiographical games, or like
autobiographical games, yeah.
Really?
I hadn't really seen much like that. I'd seen one which is called A Fantastic Longing for Adventure by Tim Hutchinson, but that is quite different. It doesn't follow like a story exactly. It's mainly from his perspective as when he was a child, and you're kind of experiencing some of his childhood experiences, but in a quite contained way, with I feel less opportunity for winding paths and different choices to unfold. So it was just something I hadn't really seen, and once the idea was kind of in my head, I just kind of wanted to see where it could go. And if nothing else, it would be really interesting for me to reflect on my own life and think about, what if I hadn't got into Dungeons and Dragons? What would I be like? And all that sorts of things. So largely it was for me. A lot of the games that I make often are for me because I want to see a game like this in the world. And then I'm just very glad that other people have enjoyed it.
And feel free not to answer this question if it's too personal, but I'd love to know what the kind of biggest things you've learned about yourself through making a game based on yourself. Because it sounds like there's a lot of self-reflection that you've done as part of it.
Yeah, for sure. A huge amount of self-reflection. I think something that kind of came out was that I value my relationship with my siblings a lot, but that it's something that I haven't necessarily interrogated a whole lot about what that looks like and how I feel about certain things that have happened to us and around us, and that there are ways that that's affecting me now in maybe some subconscious ways that I'll act in blah way without necessarily thinking about it, but then can sort of trace it back to my siblings and how I see myself and my responsibilities as an older brother. And that's kind of a thread in my life that I can sort of now poke at more clearly.
That's really cool. It sounds like it's kind of given you some like self-awareness around things you hadn't thought about in like a lot of depth necessarily before.
100%.
So I'm very just curious to know how one designs a game. Like how happen?
That is a great question that I don't know that I'm equipped to answer.
Okay,
actually.
sure.
It's how do you write a book, right? How do you do anything creative? For me, I like to draw on the world around me and create a space that I can play in an experience or a story that I've enjoyed, and create a game that allows me to sort of replay that experience over and over again. But if you kind of think of it like a choose your own adventure book, there's some writing involved and some understanding of what things would you like to be randomized, and then you kind of create it together. But it's an emerging craft, and like any craft, it takes time and kind of research and kind of knowing what's out there to get a hold on it. So that's not much of an answer.
It's more than knowing nothing about it, which is what I previously had. And it sounds like there's sort of a quite a lot of decision making around what you leave to chance and what you don't leave to chance. So I'd love to kind of hear how you navigated that and what I guess you were trying to maybe achieve with the game in those choices.
For sure, yeah. Chance and because the game, right, is the structure for the player. They walk in, you give them, they figuratively walk in, you give them a book. They go from nothing to, okay, this is how this works. So that's kind of one of the powers of games. You can tell someone to do something and they'll do it for the fiction. So what you say that they need to do or what you leave open that they can explore and do on their own is, a massive tool as part of a game designer. So one of the things that I wanted to keep was me being trans. So in every iteration of Logan, the game, your version of Logan will always be trans. Anything else is open to interpretation. I'll always have siblings and I'll always be trans. But apart from that, could go either way. I might not be an artist. I might not like forests. My parents might not get divorced. Apart from those two major things, it could go anywhere.
That's so interesting that siblings and trans were the two things you were like, these? No one messes with these. But
I don't think I necessarily went into the game with that intention either. But it's interesting to see what I decided to keep after the fact. Like that in itself is a piece of self-reflection.
So we've kind of touched a bit on self, your relationship to yourself and how that's changed. I'd love to hear a bit more about the game as a way of kind of doing self-expression.
It's been a great way to express myself and different facets of myself. So there is transness in there. There's my siblings, but there's also inside jokes that I have with my siblings of different things I like to play. I play a bit of music, so that's in there.
What kind?
Just guitar.
Very cool.
Yeah, I picked that up for this Dungeons and Dragons game.
No way.
Yeah.
You were like, this game requires a guitar player, so
yeah, I got to do it.
The commitment.
Yeah, I had learned guitar in primary school, so I did have some grounding in that. So it wasn't like from 0 to 20.
Yeah.
It wasn't very high. But yeah, I started playing guitar for that game, and then started serenading my partner. Yeah, it's a great method of self-expression. So there's my music ability in there, which is not big, but it's there. And yeah, various other facets of me that have allowed the player, if they're playing the game, to realize that, I'm not just trans, I'm a 3D whole person. And that, they can see and experience that and play through that.
Did you kind of find in making the game that you were, I guess, really thinking about yourself really holistically, and the different things you could draw into it, like the forest and your siblings, or were you just kind of I'll just kind of feel my way with it?
It was kind of more feel my way, to be honest, and thinking about strong memories that I have, strong events that have that flavor of, this is how it went in my real life, but if it went like this way, how different could things have been? I don't think it was fully holistically. There are some elements that I could have looked at myself from, a more, sort of spiritual kind of lens that I haven't applied. It was more just kind of feeling my way out and just going with what came.
Speaking of which, so self-discovery is obviously the kind of one of the cores of the game, is as far as I'm understanding it. So I'd love to hear more about how your kind of relationship to your own identity and then also kind of making the game has kind of, how that's made you reflect on self-discovery and what kind of self-discovery you've done in those processes.
I think a massive thing that's kind of clicked for me around self-discovery is that it shifts totally when you're around other people.
Oh yeah.
So playing the game with other people, that sparks things. Being in community, being in queer community sparks things.
Could you tell us a bit more about that?
100%, yeah. Seeing myself, even way back on Tumblr, seeing the first trans masc person or trans man, that, sparked some self-discovery for me. And then ongoing, there's a Discord server that I'm in that's all trans artists.
What's Discord for anyone who's not
sure? Discord's it's a chat platform on desktop or an app. For chatting voice or text. or video. And that there's a Discord particular server, which is an instance of Discord where it's all trans artists, and seeing people create art and just share their various ways of portraying themselves and their queerness has continued a self-discovery for me, thinking about names, neopronouns, and like different what if there's like some people in there who are going wild with gender and stuff.
Going wild with gender.
Yeah, like what if your gender is wizard?
That
That sounds great. That sounds like a
Awesome.
great gender.
So I'd love to, as we kind of start wrapping up, hear a bit about anything else we haven't talked about today that you're frothing to talk about.
Well, there was the guitar.
Oh yes, the
I
guitar.
could circle
Yep,
back to
yep.
the guitar.
Please tell me about this
Yeah,
guitar
so quick,
serenading.
quick guitar serenading story. So we're playing D&D, Dungeons and Dragons, and my partner's character has transformed from a woman into a man from a curse. It was a whole thing. And I was like, oh yeah, this is a good opportunity for me to explore my attraction to men. Because at that point, I thought that I was a straight man, which is laughable now. So I'm like, oh yeah, in fiction, my male character will, romance this male character. And that will be me exploring my sexuality. And that character was a bard, so they were a musician. And my partner plays ukulele. So she would often actually bring out her ukulele and play. And so I figured a good way
Really?
to... Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
It was beautiful. So I figured a good way for me to reciprocate my affection was to play another musical instrument, and I had the guitar. Fast forward a couple of years, we're dating, and it was not just...
So you weren't dating then?
We were not dating
Oh my
then.
goodness. So you romanced them in the game with the
In
guitar
fiction.
and then it became real.
And then it became real. Yeah, we were both very much in denial about our feelings for each other, and it was totally fiction. Yeah, the 15 pages of the future lives of our characters and the kids that they adopt, that's just all fiction. Yeah, and now we're dating. So
That's gorgeous.
yeah.
Well,
that's
thank you
the
for that story. That's really, really sweet and really wholesome.
Yeah.
My last question for today is, what is bringing you joy at the moment, whether it's something small or big?
What's bringing me joy right now is actually listening to folklore, folk tales. There's something about the flavor or the texture of folklore and those kinds of mythic tales that I just find really nice. I just really like it.
Are we talking fairy queen folktale, like that kind
Running
of
the whole
medieval-
gamut,
okay, any folktale.
Any folktale anywhere over the world. I've been listening to some podcasts, and particularly there's a Stories from India podcast, which is Indian folklore and mythology. So all over the world. Yeah, there's just something about those tales that, I don't know, feels different. I like it.
Very well, and I imagine it's very useful for your game designing as well to have that kind of...
Could be.
Very cool. Well, Logan, thank you so much for coming on the Tea on the Tea today. This has been the Tea on the Tea Trans in Conversation. My name is Tobi Evans, and our guest tonight has been Logan Timmins. Thank you to the Bent TV team and The Shed, and we'll see you next time.